Hello and welcome to Nerdy. For nerds, by nerds. I'm Nerdist Dave, and today I'm joined by Marquez from Shardstone. How are you doing today? Is it
Doing
Shardstone or
great, Dave.
Shardstone Assembly?
Shardstone Assembly is the full thing, but just Shardstone works too.
Yeah, yeah.
Hmm.
I actually like I was able to find a really cool GIF, and it's like the favorite part of my job for for Twitter when I did the share out, and it was just like a bunch of shards like flying around.
Easy, easy. Send me that GIF. I'm gonna start using it.
Yeah, yeah. So usually I look for something game related. I'm like, I wonder what'll come up if I type in shard.
Hmm.
Yeah. That's why it's always fun to have like streamers on because they have so many gifs of them that you're
Yeah, right.
like you
Oh
can just
man,
use them.
so many, and they have emojis and everything too.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So if you'd be so kind to kind of introduce yourself and tell people a little bit about what you do.
Word. So I'm Andrew MARQUIS, everyone. Nice to meet you guys. I am the writer and one half of the Shardstone Assembly team, along with my creative partner, Andy Alexandru, who unfortunately could not make it here today. So he is the artist for Shardstone Assembly. He does all the layout, the paintings, and everything. I handle all the game design, and I also do the lion's share of the writing, the editing, and all that stuff. At Shardstone Assembly, we have a diversity of products that we make. Our big focus is that we want to kind of inspire people with creativity and story making and all of that, and really expand people's horizons of how they consider gaming or fantasy or storytelling or any of that stuff. So we have a couple books over there, Scavenger, which is a fifth edition setting, and Skullbox as well. Skullbox being a smaller rules light game that's kind of meant for one shots and party stuff. So yeah, that's what we do, and it's who I am.
So we had you on way back when for
Mm-hmm.
Scavenger, which is like you said, it's a 5e setting, but it's also like post apocalyptic.
Mm-hmm. So, Scavenger is the story of a world called Akara, a smaller planet than ours, a little closer to the sun, a non-magical planet. About 50 years ago, in Akara, in the city-state of Tarnak, there's this building called the Monolith that opened up, and on the other side of it, they encountered another world, which they call the World Torn Apart. The story of Scavenger is essentially not only the story of what they find and the secrets they learn and the magic they discover in the world torn apart, but Akara itself is going through what is called either the Great Dying or the Cataclysm, a extreme extinction event where these like earthquakes that swallow cities, these hypercanes that batter the coast and make naval trade impossible. All kinds of horrible things are going on, and so not only are they trying to figure out what exactly is torn and all this new stuff coming through, but they're also trying to find any kind of answer they can to stop the Great Dying or otherwise find a new place to go.
Man, that one feels a little too real to
Yeah, right.
me.
A little bit real, a little bit real.
Minus the magical doorway. I feel like we were getting all the other stuff.
I mean, if we had a monolith here, that would be great. I would definitely be going through it.
Yeah, yeah. Are there any polar vortexes?
Now that you mention it, yes, we do have in our book, there is a Zood, is what we call it, which is
Yeah.
a Mongolian term as well, where there's a polar vortex essentially that will melt and cause winter storms that happen, which in a savanna environment is very destructive. So,
Yeah, yeah. I feel like you just said, "What's the what is the environmental conditions happening now in the last 5 years?" and just throw it in a book.
hey, climate change is, though a horrible thing, it has been a lot of inspiration for what's going on in
Yeah.
Scavenger too.
Our places there just on fire all the time.
Um, so we haven't mentioned this before, but in a future book, please forgive me, Andy, for saying this. We actually do have a place that is literally on fire all the time. So yes,
Yeah. The Kingdom of California.
yeah, yeah.
So crazy. Yeah, like so I live here in New Jersey and like people like to crap on New Jersey, but I'm like, you know what? It's
Hmm.
not on fire most of the time. We really don't get
Which is good.
earthquakes. We don't get extreme weather, so I'll
Hmm.
take it. And if I've planned properly, I may have beachfront property within the next 10, 20 years.
Ooh, that's good.
We'll
Unfortunately,
see.
beachfront property in Akara now is extremely dangerous. So,
Yeah, yeah. Now though, if I miscalculate it, I'd be like,
hmm.
oh man, I should have put my property 100 feet that way.
Yeah, right. With the rising water levels, yeah.
Yeah. So what about Skullbox? That sounds like fun.
Skullbox is a lot of fun. So Skullbox, we worked with another artist. He's a Romanian cartoonist by the name of Gospo. So basically, Skullbox is you play these sentient skulls who just recently came to life inside of this little dungeon of theirs by this golden apple of Discord. It turns out, though, that the city or the nation of Everbliss, which this dungeon is in, really wants your golden apple of Discord. But if they take it, you skulls will go right back to being 6 feet under. So what you have to do is you have to pilot these magical boxes, set up psychotic traps, and then make all the worm-lipped do-gooders who are coming to take your stuff regret ever coming to the dungeon. So that's what Skullbox is about.
It's a reverse dungeon.
Yeah, it's a reverse dungeon, exactly. It's a reverse dungeon, lots of cartoon themes in it. It's very much based on a lot of punk music as well. The zine itself is ode to the punk zines of the 80s and 90s and everything. And the world has a lot of, musical references and all that stuff in it too.
Nice. So you're basically trying to hold down the dungeon and keep people from coming and
Mm-hmm.
taking your thing to unalive you.
Yep, exactly. They'll come in 3 waves, and at the end, they'll have their boss come through, and you have the weird traps. My favorite being the starved cannibal on a leash, which is exactly what it sounds like.
What was the inspiration for that?
Skullbox came from, again, one of the punk zines of the 80s and 90s. If you look at it through it, you'll see a lot of that kind of like layout and stuff. I myself was inspired a lot by cartoons and stuff that I'd watched as a kid growing up and everything. But the real inspiration is just Gospo's art. Gospo had come up with the designs of the skulls for his kid, actually. His kid was getting into like that homebrew version of D&D you play with your kids where there really aren't rules. You kind of just make stuff up. So he made up these cool little skulls and boxes and things that were, sentient and moved around. And me and Andy saw it and we were like, we can make something really fun and really cool out of this. And this skull box.
So why did you decide that, like, essentially it sounds like you're making adventurers the enemies, the villains of the game?
It was Andy's idea originally. Andy was like, would it be kind of fun, like, if you played the people in the dungeon, because the skulls themselves, they look pretty punkish if you look at them. And I kind of like the themes of, that is inherent to punk with rebellion against the man, the establishment, which like the big overarching like villain in the Skullbox universe, so to speak. And we wanted to kind of be like, when you're a hero, you're going places, stealing stuff. Sometimes, maybe, not often, but maybe the dungeon where you're stealing stuff in, you really shouldn't be taking the stuff because maybe they depend on it or what have you. And in this case, the skulls really do depend on it. So it's kind of like a thus or them situation that's going on there.
And what mechanics are you using for Skullbox?
So Skullbox is completely original rule set that I designed myself to be very rules light and easy to play. It's based off a D6. All you need is a handful of D6 to play it. You have 3 ability scores, which is cool, mosh, and weird. And then you roll a number of D6 equal to your stat. And if you get a number of 5 or 6s, or if you get 1, it's a success. If you get extra successes, those can help with your abilities or with your traps when you build your traps. And then in between the raids themselves, you have these story prompts that you will play out as you build the traps. For example, with the starved cannibal and the leash, you have to convince the cannibal to come help you guys and be like, yo, cannibal, you don't like the establishment. We don't like the establishment. And then you have to do it in a wacky way and play that out. And then you would play through the actual raid itself.
Let us put you on a leash as part of this trap.
Yeah, I mean, listen, it's the cannibal's idea, not the skull's idea. There's all consent here.
Very, very important. I feel like there's some other themes going on there that might be a little bit too adult for the show.
I will say that Skullbox is intended primarily for teenagers or young adults and everything. Though if you're in your 20s or older and you just want to have a good time with your friends and everything, it's very easy for that too. I play with my roommates and some other friends from time to time.
Yeah, it sounds like it's something you could also go really cartoony with and have fun with that way.
Exactly. I think the first playtest session I did of it, they made their dungeon was in a rundown mall and a FYE store, and they had a bunch of goth kids that were helping them out build traps and everything in really cartoony ways. So it's pretty wacky and absurd, but it leans into it, and I think it's better because of that.
Yeah, Challenger says adventurers don't steal; they just liberate stuff.
Yeah, exactly. They just liberate stuff. Sure. The skulls disagree.
Yeah. That dungeon needs some freedom.
Yeah, right. No freedom here, please. Just let us have our apple and go home.
Yeah. Is there anything behind the golden apple?
I mean, originally we were thinking about doing a unicorn horn. We scrapped the unicorn horn. I don't remember the reason why. So the golden apple of discord. So the idea for that comes actually from a cartoon called The Grim Adventures of Billy and Mandy, where they literally had the Greek goddess Discord herself. She would show up in episodes and throw down her apple, and it would just cause like everything to go wrong.
Yeah.
So that was kind of the original inspiration. In this case, the apple is, of course, a powerful magical relic or artifact. So the establishment wants it so they can cement their musical legacy over the entire world and, hit the heights of like godhood or whatever. But the skulls themselves, if they're really down bad and if they're about to lose, you can take a bite of the apple and it will supercharge you with like chaotic powers and magic and stuff. So that's kind of the ideas behind it there.
I vaguely remember that show. Not vaguely. I remember that show because I watched quite a bit of it because my son used to watch it, and my wife hated that show and wouldn't let him watch it, and I would just always let him watch it.
It's probably my favorite cartoon, Grim Adventures of Billy and Mandy.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
It has,
the Grim Reaper just getting tortured by kids.
Yeah,
so funny.
The Jamaican Grim Reaper at that. I love it so much.
Yeah, it was good stuff. So what are you guys doing in the future? Where do you want to go next?
So right now we are working on one thing a piece. We're working on something new for Skullbox, which we haven't debuted or announced yet, but that will probably be happening in Zine Quest next year in February. And the other thing we're doing for Scavenger, which has been the lion's share of our time recently, is our next book in the series, which is called Torn and Beyond. So Scavenger is kind of like, you could think of it as like Dune Part 1, where it's all about flavor and ideas and like getting you into the world. Torn and Beyond is going to explore the world of Torn, or the world torn apart, our greater multiverse, which we call the Beyond. You'll be able to use it for campaigns, epics. You'll be able to use it for one-shots or trilogies as much as you want to, episodic things. It'll have its own story structures in it and a tremendous amount of ideas in it for being able to run Torn and Beyond. And quite frankly, I'm pretty confident it's going to end up probably being one of the best books for the edition, third or first party. So I'm really excited to get that one out next year too.
Nice. Mm-hmm. Do you have any ideas, beyond the Scavenger stuff in Skullbox?
We have some stuff that we've been working on. Scavenger started originally with Andy. I kind of came onto that project, and why we're pretty much co-creators on it. It's his like brainchild, I would say. And Skullbox is more of Gospos. I've been working on something I've been wanting to do for a while that I call Baroque. It's not in a good enough state yet that it's ready to be announced, but it's going to be hopefully a very weird and mystical but fun tabletop experience. So I'm looking forward to eventually being able to get that out there too.
Are you thinking like 5e or your own system?
It started originally as a 5e spinoff, but I'm thinking the more I work on it, while I will be using some rules, the core 5e structure maybe, it's really kind of spinning off so much that it will essentially be its own game.
Nice. And what genre would you call that? Is weird its own genre now?
Yeah, I mean, well, weird fiction is a genre. I don't think I would call it weird fiction. That's usually more for like Cthulhu and stuff. Mm-hmm. But if I had to just give it one like ad hoc, it would be like a mystical almost. Kind of like imagine like Melisandre from Game of Thrones. Yeah. Like imagine you were playing her or doing that kind of stuff. And you have a kind of a good idea of what I'm going with Baroque.
Okay. So everything thus far has been kind of like fantasy / post-apocalyptic.
Mm-hmm. Scavenger is probably more science fantasy. It's actually, so the term we give it is a Bronze Age science fantasy. Akara being a Bronze Age planet, and Torn being very much science fantasy ideas, and Scavenger being the combination. What happens with like early people without a scientific method come into contact with something that's very advanced and very like supernatural, or in their terms, hyperdimensional. So I think Baroque would be closer to more traditional fantasy than Scavenger, which is, I think, a more niche or kind of offshoot of fantasy.
Nice. Is there any particular genres you want to move into down the road?
I thought about going into like science fiction a little bit, with Dune being a huge inspiration, but my Dune inspiration kind of just goes to Scavenger at the end of the day.
Yeah.
I would kind of like to do something more urban, eventually maybe deeper on in my career, like an urban fantasy type thing, something like Monster Hearts, but not, exactly like Monster Hearts, or something more like that would be pretty fun. Maybe Dresden Files, in that kind of vein. But I haven't really developed those ideas too much so far.
So it sounds like you're a pretty solid fantasy guy.
Yeah, for
Like,
now, I would say.
yeah, even when you branch out and get a little weird with it, it's still kind of like offshoots of fantasy.
I like playing with magic a lot. I like playing. I do a lot of studying of like the real life occult and mysticism and grimoires and magic and all that kind of stuff. And I like channeling a lot of what we have done for our magic in real life into my fantasy and everything, and kind of exploring the human condition with that. So there's always kind of like a literary bent to what I'm doing. I'm very much always trying to like capture something that I think is true to reality, even though it's fantasy and magic and all this other stuff. I want it to be able to ring true with people. So long as I'm able to keep that, really any genre out there is something that I would be willing to jump into. Even like for my personal writing or like my novel writing, I do historical fiction, for example, which is not fantasy whatsoever. It's all like pure, like real stuff.
Yeah.
But I still try to keep that thread of the literary bent of, this is what it's like to be like a human in these situations, or even in our world. So
Yuck. I'm not a
yeah,
fan
right.
of the real world, past or present.
hmm
uh, so, Mark Hodor had some pretty good novels. And the first one
hmm
is Spring Heel Jack. And it's kind of like, it's steampunk, but it
hmm
starts off as historical fiction and uses
Mm.
historical fiction characters. The main
hmm
character is Sir Richard Burton.
hmm
And then the poet Swinehill. And then
Ooh.
it just gets like crazier and crazier with each book, and
hmm
more and more science fiction, more and more occult stuff.
That's pretty fun. All history type deal.
Yeah, but it's all
hmm
based off of like history. Like the main
hmm
big bad, some of the main big bads are like historical figures, and like, oh, that's
hmm
funny. And they
That's
they
dope. That's
bring up
fun.
things like Edison and Tesla, and
Ooh, that's fun. That's fun.
yeah,
Steampunk, I think, is a pretty fun genre to play with too. I
yeah,
haven't done too much with steampunk. And I think that steampunk unfairly gets a pretty bad rap, but I feel like there's a lot in steampunk you could really play with. And I think the other punks are really fun too, like diesel punk, like World War II type stuff or World War
yeah.
One type stuff is pretty fun. So
I just got bored with like in like my fiction, in my science fiction and fantasy, and just like reading and stuff with fantasy, and I just started moving in weird directions, and
I feel
diving
that.
more into steampunk, and like
Mhm.
kind of like the variants of that. And there's also like this like really strange crossover between like steampunk and the occult.
Yes, there
uh
is. It's always there.
that is has been kind of fun to explore as well.
Have you
uh,
read the Gentleman Bastards books?
no.
They're pretty steampunky and pretty occult too. They dive a little bit more into fantasy, deeper into the books, but they kind of always keep it with like your rogues in a steampunky world.
Yeah.
Very much kind of a fun genre to play with there.
Yeah, I feel like it's good to mix it up, and especially if you're like if you're playing a lot of D&D or whatever your favorite RPG is,
Mhm.
like you definitely need some things that are like kind of outside of that scope to mix it up and
Always. Mhm.
inspire.
Yeah. The term is intertextuality, which I think is super important. I always am looking, I get inspiration from the weirdest things. So like for Scavenger, for example, I watch a lot of PBS Space Time on YouTube to
Okay.
get a lot of my ideas and everything. A book I'm reading right now, which is called Hamlet, is about Shakespeare's son, Hamlet, who died before he wrote the play Hamlet, which while at first I thought, this might be kind of boring, reading it is a masterpiece. So like, I read stuff like that. I'm like, you know what? I can apply this to my games and my content and stuff. So it's always fun to take things and recontextualize it or look at it from another lens.
Yeah, another one that was like completely out of left field that I started reading a while back was the Hard Luck Hank series, and
Hardlock Hank.
it's all like science fiction, and
Mm-hmm.
like it's very like tongue in cheek
Mm-hmm.
and immature, very immature. But
Sounds like a fun read though. I feel
yeah,
like
and that's
fun
just
reads,
it. And
I
there's a
like
bunch
fun
of them.
reads. Mm-hmm.
Like his catchphrase is like "eat suck face."
Yeah, okay, I see what you're talking about now.
Yeah, and like the titles of the novels are all like ridiculous.
Mm.
And I got into that for a little while, and I think I subjected my son to, because anymore I tend to be more like audiobooks,
Mm.
and
I mean, it's a big one of those too, yeah.
I subjected my son to it when we are driving to Gen Con the one year.
Made him
and
listen to it the
and
whole way.
and he actually got into it, and was just laughing because the stuff is so ridiculous.
That's good. Glad he enjoyed it then.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I think
So
that fun reads like that are pretty important. That's why a big reason why like I made Skullbox, for example, is because Scavenger was very serious. I needed something fun and silly to kind of cleanse the palate, so to speak. So same with fiction or movies or TV shows, it all applies to.
yeah, uh what did you think of the Dune? Did you watch the new Dune?
I watched the new Dune, so I think that Dune. I have always thought that Dune, the whole book series, would be better made as a TV series, like Game of Thrones style scope. I like the movie. Of course, like every Dune reader, I mean, there's changes. I was like, man, I wish they would have just, kept this or said that,
Yeah.
because I know there's like some cut scenes and stuff and everything. But from a visual and auditory standpoint, my God, seeing like las guns for the first time, I did not think that las guns were that scary, but they are terrifying beyond belief. And the shields, oh my God. It was so cool seeing all that.
Yeah, I was so disappointed when it ended. Like I was
Yeah,
like,
yeah, man. I can't Dune Part 2, I cannot wait to see when they cover that stuff in that part of the book. Like
yeah.
when they do the invasion and all that stuff with the Emperor. And Villeneuve saying he wants to do Dune Messiah because it's short as like a part 3,
Mhm.
which I think is good because it kind of completes the story of Paul and everything. So I look forward to seeing all that.
So I've never read the novels.
Mm,
I must say, but also the plus side is that I don't have to worry about anything being ruined.
yeah, yeah.
So if I do go back and read them, I feel like you're on better footing. You can enjoy
Yeah.
the thing and then ruin it later, I
I'd
guess.
agree with that. I would say that Dune the movie was pretty faithful to the book. The only things that were kind of missing was like, some kind of like character building scenes and everything that for a movie you kind of can't include it because the movie would be like 4 or 5 hours long,
Like
right?
the
Dune's
first one.
yeah, yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Yeah,
Like the old one, yeah.
yeah,
I mean, Dune is like a 600 plus page book, so it's like
yeah.
but I think if it was a series, that probably would have been one of the best series of all time. That would have been nuts. But it's still a great movie, and I like it a lot. And I'm really excited for the second one.
The scary part with something like that is, especially if you really enjoy it, is like, man, did it, because it's so expensive to make. It's like, did it make enough money
So
for us to
yeah,
get a second one?
yeah, right. And that was a big fear for Dune as well. They were like, man, we really need to do well at the box office to greenlight Dune Part 2.
Yeah,
But literally, like the day after it debuted in the United States and on streaming services, they greenlit it. So I was very happy with that. And really,
yeah.
the movie was so good. I was like, there's no way there's not going to be it. They have to make a part 2 of this. It's too good not to have a part 2.
Well, occasionally, like they'll put out a movie and I'll go watch it, and I'm like, but like I was like, I didn't see this anywhere. How are they going to make any money? Right? Like the
Yeah, right.
marketing was just like terrible.
Yeah, yeah. Blade Runner 2049 was one of those, which like financially and
Yeah,
stateside domestic, it didn't do well. And that's my favorite movie of all time. And also that is another Denis Villeneuve movie.
yeah.
So
I don't know. Will we ever get anything new? That's the real
yeah,
question.
right. It feels like I mean, comic book movies is really the only new things I think we get these days. And even then we're getting like another Batman movie, which I am excited for, but it's
Yeah.
like, man, I kind of do wish we would get something new. But here's hoping that maybe one day in 10 years I can have a Scavenger movie out, then I'll be satisfied.
There you go. But you just have
Yeah.
to make it so, like
Yeah, exactly.
like the Expanse, right? Those guys.
Yeah,
Like
exactly.
didn't the book start off from like their GURPS game or something?
It did. I think it was either a GURPS or a Traveler game, one of the two. I can't remember. And then from there, they made it into a novel series, and then that novel series is now, as everyone knows, a great show on Netflix. So
And the RPG.
yeah, and an RPG. Yeah, isn't it made by? I think it's made by Free League. I might be wrong here.
No, no. Free League
No.
does scoop up pretty much everything
Yeah,
else. No, it was Green Ronin.
Green Ronin.
And it
Yeah, that's
uses
who
the
it
age
was.
system.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but I
Yeah,
could
Free
see how
League
you
does have
would be like,
everything.
you could just say Free League, and that's like a safe bet.
Yeah,
They seem
right.
to scoop everything up.
I mean, they have Star Trek, they have Dune, they have Alien, they have Blade Runner. They're making a Blade Runner RPG for next year. They somehow magically got Lord of the Rings. So it's like, yeah,
Yeah.
Free League really is a force to be reckoned with when it comes to IPs.
Yeah. Yeah, so I don't know. So how much gaming are you getting in nowadays?
low key a little bit too much. So for Torn and Beyond, I'm a
Yeah.
very big proponent of playtesting. So I'm currently running a total of 5 playtest campaigns for Torn and Beyond, 2 of which are bi-weekly, two of which are weekly. No, 3 of which. Oh my God, 3 of which are weekly. So it's a little bit too much D&D these days, but it's been really fun being able to play out my content and
Yeah.
see what's working and what's not. So it's been really great on that end.
Yeah, I just had to turn down a game. Someone asked me to be on one of those streams, and I was like,
Mm,
I'm all right. I've already got quite a few games going on.
yeah.
Basically we game like 3 out of the 4 Saturdays,
Mm,
and we game Tuesday nights, and I got a Saturday morning game.
yeah.
I
You've as
think
many
I'm at
games as I do.
capacity.
Yeah. The thing is, I'm still even trying to get in more games sometimes. Sometimes I'll see like an interest post on Absolute Tabletop, or I'll see like Drake at Mini Terrain Domain getting ready for something.
Yeah.
And I'm like, man, I would love to be in one of these. This would be sick. But as you said, at capacity. So,
Yeah, yeah. Because then then it's hard to get anything else done. And
mhm.
also I'm also on a Vast Grim game too every other week.
Mm,
Forgot about that one. So
mm.
so it gets hard. It is hard to say no though.
It is. But I mean, it's even hard to say no when it's like you have so many ideas. Like, oh man, I could make a great character for that. Oh man, that would be a great campaign to play
Yeah.
through. But balancing the gaming with the game design and the writing and the real life stuff, it is a lot to balance at once.
Yeah, yeah. So, are you playing all D&D or are you playing other things as well?
Right now, it's pretty much all D&D, which I have played a lot of other games in the past. I really want to resurrect. Hopefully next year when Torn and Beyond is done, I want to resurrect a L5R5E game again that I used to do. There's some other games I've been looking at. I would love to play the MARQUIS campaign or the upcoming Moria campaign for the new One
Okay.
Ring Second Edition. That would be really fun. But at the moment, it really is kind of just half unfortunately. I do enjoy D&D and I love it because it's my content, but I am just playing D&D at the moment.
Cool. Yeah, Vast Grim is a Morkborg sci-fi horror hack.
Mm.
And where Morkborg is like fantasy meets heavy metal,
Mm-hmm.
Vast Grim is punk meets sci-fi horror.
Ooh, that's fun. I like that. I'll look into that. What's it called? Vast Grim, you said?
Vast Grim, yeah, yeah. They
That's
did
dope.
a pretty good crowdfunding project, and then the designer Brian is like, when I grew up, he was more into the punk scene, and he was influenced by
Mm-hmm.
that. So,
Mm.
uh,
They also had that new Kickstarter out, Cyborg, the Morkborg guys.
yeah, yeah, I saw that.
Yeah, that looks pretty dope. I really like even though it's very chaotic to look through. Their graphic design really is like it tells you everything like about tone and atmosphere just by looking at like one page spread of it, which is
It's
cool.
awesome and annoying all at the same time.
All at the same time, exactly. So as much as I love it and I love reading through it, I'm like, man, to actually play this game and to understand the rules just because of how esoteric and baroque the layout is.
Yeah,
Yeah, it is a
yeah.
little bit annoying too. Yeah.
It looks fantastic, but it's hard to find what you're looking for them. Now the plus side is like it's a really rules like game. It's an
Mhm.
OSR game.
Yeah.
Like you're essentially going to roll a d20
See what happens.
and there's
Yeah.
not like a lot of rules to look up anyway. So
Mm-hmm.
it's
More
that
board
got that
campaigns are
going
pretty
for it.
short too. Yeah. Yeah.
Could you imagine like a Pathfinder or a Starfinder style game being
Oh
played
man.
out like that?
Oh man. Why I think it would look beautiful. I can't help but imagine how painful it'd be to look up rules like constantly at the table if you had a
Yeah.
300 page like Mork Borg style Pathfinder game. Oh
It would be
god.
insane.
Mm-hmm.
That's what you hand to someone if you hate them.
Yeah, right.
Learn
But it would
these
be a fun
rules.
art project. So
Yeah, yeah. I mean, they definitely pushed the layout to like
mhm,
the nth degree. I mean, I've
and
never seen a book look like that so pretty and
yeah.
so awesome.
There's another game that came out recently. Exalted Press is the one they did the Kickstarter for. It's called Arc, which is another, little post-apocalyptic game. The
Yeah,
layout is pretty push. It's not quite as, like foreboding or wild and reckless as Mork Borg's layout is, but it is still a pretty, heavy art like layout kind of scheme they got going on, which again, very pretty to look at, but also very annoying to read through, but also a pretty fun game.
Yeah, yeah. Well, because it's like you're looking at a page and it's like all of a sudden the thing you need, you expect it to be here, but it's up here in the corner.
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, again, it looks very nice, and if it does one thing, it tells you exactly what the atmosphere of the game is. If
Yeah,
you
you
look at
just know.
Morkborg, yeah, you just know.
And it's like super easy to run.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I know like Vasgrim took a lot of inspiration from that aspect. I believe the campaign we're playing in now,
Mm-hmm.
the the GM who's the designer, he's just like he asked us all for a couple of dice rolls, and like it's just all like
Yeah,
randomly
that's
generated.
cool.
And
Yeah,
also like I played in a couple other games of it, and it's the same exact
mhm.
way. He's like,
Yeah.
I need to make more random charts for this because I'm running out of variables.
All the Morkborg hacks, I would say this day are probably, they're all, of course, they're rules light because they're Morkborg hacks. But I'm starting to see a trend overall too, where a lot of people are just kind of not just preferring only rules light systems, but even chunkier systems like D&D 5e. They still want like shorter games, like 6 month or fewer games, which I think is partially just an answer to how hard it is to schedule people for really long games for in-depth systems. So
Yeah, I mean, it feels like the community, like there's a huge portion of the community that are adults, right, compared to like kids playing. So we all have like schedules that are vying for our time.
Yeah. People
So
with families, kids, jobs, all that stuff.
blocking out 6 hours for a game just isn't feasible anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And also, there's more online play, and like I can play much longer sitting at a table with my friends.
Yeah.
Than I can, sitting at my desk,
I usually
on a
keep my
chat.
online games to like 2.5 hours, 3 hours max, and that
Yeah.
feels like 4 or 5 hours. So
Yeah.
I feel that.
I'm also, but like also like when you're playing like an online game, you're like zoomed in and focused in on the game, and you're not doing other things. Like people are less likely to get up and even like use the bathroom or grab something to eat than when you're at an in-person game where I feel like there's a whole lot more stuff that's going on.
Yeah. And a lot of online games, with strangers, or you might be on Roll20 looking for a group or an absolute tabletop if you throw up like an interest post or what have you. So yeah, I definitely feel that the trend towards like shorter games, shorter campaigns, and more rules light games is the intersection of those three factors.
The yeah, like I think like in person tends to be more of a social experience.
Exactly. Bring food, do all that fun stuff and everything.
So so Brimstone says they're only into really long campaigns. But you know what? Even when we are doing like our in-person home games, like I still like to set, and which is something we never used to do. I like to set like a predetermined number of sessions, and then be like, all right, this is where we're going to end, because it's always like you can always add more to it. Like that part's really
exactly.
easy.
That same philosophy. So for my roommates, I'm starting, that's my 5th playtest campaign that I'm starting. We decided already it's going to be 10 sessions. And then if we like it, if we have time and everything, we'll just add another 10 sessions onto it after that. And we'll just keep reevaluating at the end of every 10 session arc, essentially. And I think that's a pretty smart way to go about it because it's feasible. 10 sessions is, that's a pretty good story you can get out of that. It's a pretty good experience you can get out of that. Games like Shadow of the Demon Lord, for example, are like 11 session campaigns and everything. And like you said, you can always add more if you want to, which is good. So
yeah, and like when you get to the end, like we look at it as like an opportunity. Is everyone still cool with the characters they're playing? Do they want to do something different? Like the last campaign we did, half the players wanted to play their characters from the campaign before, and the other half wanted to play new characters. So we just swapped out.
Yeah, which makes a lot of sense. I mean, that's what we're doing in my Wednesday game too. One of my players was like, I kind of don't want to stick with like a same character for 20, 30, 40 sessions. Other one did want to stick with it. So I was like, good compromise at the end of every arc. Easy, just bring in a new character if you want to.
So what kind of stuff are you trying to play test?
So, oh man, there's a lot in Torn and Beyond. which I'm trying to hit a lot of different angles. I'm trying
Uh,
to expand. Well, let me start here. Fifth edition, I think for me, I've learned how to craft it very finely. And I'm very big that all of my books provide an experience to the people who both read and play them, right? So I want Torn and Beyond to be able to provide many different kinds of experiences that are kind of interconnected or similar to one another. So what I'm experimenting with everything from, campaign structures to rules. My favorite being the Radiant Evolutions, where basically by doing these tasks for this being called the entity, you begin to evolve and you get these new kind of mechanics and everything related to your evolution. I'm playing with magic items and what is a magic item or an artifact and what have you, and how those can interact with you and everything. Prophecies coming with all that, making story generator tools that will attach to the magic items. Probably the biggest thing in the book, though, would be the impossibilities, which an impossibility is a one-of-a-kind creature born from this place called the Sea of Mist, where basically these virtual particles mix with these Shardstone particles that can kind of draw from any creature that's ever existed in Torn. And so you get these extremely hyperdimensional, magical, impossible life forms that come out, right? And I've made a huge, I think it's like a 56-page generator so far with 3 different types of paradigms. Only one of them of a possibility, only one of them which you fight. And those are kind of like boss monsters. The other ones are kind of like an environmental puzzle that you have to solve before they kill you. The other ones are kind of like hazards or parasites and everything. And playing with like how to make monsters exciting, but not too much for the GM to run, and how to make this kind of work with theater of the mind and all that kind of stuff. These are the kind of things I'm kind of experimenting with to create the experiences that I want with Torn and Beyond.
and so, what elements do your players seem to really gravitate towards?
They like the weirdness of it, which I know we mentioned this earlier. They like the fact that I'm bringing up kind of ideas and concepts from the real world with like science and physics and all that kind of stuff and how reality works, how I'm intermingling that with it. They love the magic items. They like the story tools the most. The story generators are the things I think I'm also very proud of, just because I feel like it's very important that for every magic item or impossibility or rival scavenger ring, you can have something from it that kind of either connect it to your game or to the general world you're in. And so they're really having fun exploring all these different ways that they evolve and how the stories progress and how these like rumors intersect with them and all that kind of stuff so far.
Nice. And for you, what is your favorite thing to kind of like make kind of like the centerpieces of your
Mm-hmm.
stories?
I like showing people stuff that they have never imagined before, which I feel like, that sounds almost like a little bit haughty or what have you. But I'm very confident that the imagery that I evoke, especially with Andy's beautiful and gorgeous art, is these kind of ideas and these images that make you think about things from a different perspective. I'm always trying to kind of expose my players to new story ideas or new visuals or just even new concepts or themes that they get excited about and then they run away with themselves. And I get to see, which is very fun for me, how they explore these concepts themselves. Like I ran a game last night. We've been talking a lot about, life, death, rebirth, evolution, all that kind of thing. And just seeing how my players are really interacting with these ideas and taking it in all these different directions and everything, it makes me feel very good that I'm able to accomplish my mission, which is expanding the horizon, like the creative or imagination horizon, so to speak.
Nice. So, do you prefer running these games, or do you like to be a player?
Oh man, see, that's a big secret. What I do love GMing. Oh man, if someone could run for me, Torn and Beyond or Scavenger, that would be ace. I love being a player a lot. I love making lots of characters. GMing is a little bit stressful. So kind of an answer to that in Torn and Beyond, I've created a lot of ways to try and make prep fun for myself that I hope
Uh,
other people will find fun as well. So I would say because I've been GMing now for about a year straight and playing very little, I would like to be a player for a while, but ultimately it's probably about 50-50 for me.
have you had anyone run Torn for you yet?
I have not yet. Jake at Mini Terrain Domain, we've been in talks. So hopefully next year in 2022, he'll be running me a little mini scavenger campaign so I can get down and dirty in it. So really looking forward to that.
So Brian has a question for you.
Mhm.
What are your favorite ways to bestow a cool magic item on a player? What makes it feel the best?
So I think that a magic item, in order to feel good to a player, not only does it have to have effects that you can't normally get from your class items or your class features, I should say, it also has to have some nicheness to it. I think something that makes it feel special. And then you have to find a way to kind of tie it into the idea of the character. So, for example, we have these things called Zenith Artifacts, which are these leftover artifacts by the Zenith people who used to live in Torn before they disappeared. We don't know what happened to them. When you attune to a Zenith artifact, you begin to have these dreams. You have dreams as if you were the Zenith person and you begin to live through parts of their life. You have what we call our shadow thoughts, where when you see certain things in Torn, you'll have like a new behavior or personality trait that will trigger from it, which my players have had a lot of fun, like kind of like reinventing themselves to like match these or interpreting it in different ways. Other magic items should have maybe some kind of lore significance. So we have these things called the dimensional frames that you're trying to create in universe and everything. And these are very big to the overall goal of Torn and trying to master Torn or what have you. And other parts of it are just like things that the scavengers themselves can find. Players love to organically find things, I've discovered, and I think it's kind of like common wisdom too. And so just having stuff for them to scavenge, not to make a pun here, has been very important to making these magic items feel very personal and fun to the characters themselves. Also, their effects are weird. I've made some very weird magical item effects that I'm really excited to show to people. So,
So you mentioned like certain items kind of cause them to relive the lives of the
mhm.
people that came before them. Have you ever done that in game where you're like, hey, you're in this scenario and you start feeling a certain way, you're not sure why?
So what I do is I DM the players. I send them the shadow thought in question. So that way, and I prompt them in the game, like, you see this thing, tell me, how does your character with their shadow thought react to it, for example? And when it comes to like reliving lives and everything, basically, like, so last night, for example, we start the session off in a dream, and I tell the player what they're dreaming about, and then I get the reaction of the player when they wake up, because in the dream they're not their character, they're the person who made the Zenith artifact. And when they wake up, that's where you had the fun where it's like, what was that dream? What did it mean? Like, I see things in there I've seen before, like, what does that mean for me? Am I in danger? That kind of thing. So it's added a level of mystery to the setting that they've really enjoyed playing with too.
So have you added new races or classes or that kind of
Mhm.
things that people can expect?
So Scavenger, we'll start with the core Scavenger. We don't use the vanilla 5e races. It's all original races. Our humans, which we call Acarans. I made new human statistics for that specific race that are different than the variant or the classic human. And then we have two races in the book, in the core book, which is the Kith, which are these yellow hyper empaths who can kind of like read nature and read people, and these four-armed Morg, who are kind of like these tall, very strong people, but they're very solitary and very pragmatic and philosophical. And then in Torn and Beyond, we have another new race we're coming out with, which we haven't quite shown off yet, but I'll talk about it, which is the Covenant, which are these aliens from another world. They have multiple minds in their heads, and as they grow older, they shed minds, like personalities, and they have like this technology they've worked into their bodies and everything. And then we have
Please
a
tell
new
me that's how they
lineage.
reproduce.
Yeah, I mean, so I won't go too much into it, but they have in their home world, which they are now stranded from, which is like their big tragedy.
Yeah.
And their home world, they know they have ways of basically creating more covenant, essentially.
Yeah.
And then we also have in Torn and Beyond coming out a new lineage as well, using the lineage rules from Tasha's and everything, and from Van Richten's, which are the Torn Bloods, which is when somebody is born in the world torn apart, or if your mother had been in the world torn apart before, and then giving birth to you in a car, for example, you come out this kind of not fully mutant, but you are a change. You are a Torn Blood. You have this radiant fuchsia or purple skin that is patterned across it, these red on black eyes. You have some psionic abilities. A lot of Torn Bloods early on in the story of Scavenger, when the monolith first opened, were kind of like left in Torn. but there were people who would save them and kind of took them to the north of Torn where they could kind of like, grow and live. And now they have this basically this tribal system up there, which they call the Torn Blood Rings. And they're kind of like these natives, like this very nascent civilization that kind of shows what we would be like if we had been born in Torn or had been involved to be in Torn and what our future may be like.
Nice. For the aliens, for the Covenant, I like the ideas when they of the that perhaps when they shed their personalities,
Mm-hmm.
that the personality becomes a new Covenant.
Oh, that could be a fun idea. I might play with that. Right now, what it is, so they call the Covenant, of course, because there's like a covenant of minds. So they
Yeah,
kind of change. They have the one mind that's currently developing, and then they can change to a different mind. And when they do so, they inherit all of that mind's skills and abilities. So it lets you kind of like, it gives you some more customization over your character because you're able to kind of like, change your proficiencies or what have you when you
yeah,
change to a
yeah.
different covenant mind and all that stuff.
I don't know if you've watched the Doom Patrol show.
Mm-hmm.
uh the one character Jane has a bunch of different personalities, and
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
depending on which one is the dominant at the time
Mm-hmm.
determines like the skill set, the ability set that
Yeah,
they have.
exactly. I didn't want to do anything, like too close to like, dissociative DID, dissociative identity disorder in real
Yeah.
life. So I mean, of course, there's differences in everything. But the Covenant, the core idea for them was they were kind of reptilians. So I was like, how do I want to do the reptilian idea of like, immortality or like rebirth, but not them just actually just like being reborn or anything. I thought the idea, like as you get older, you just develop more and more sophisticated minds. You can draw on these minds. Would be a fun way of showing that kind of like rebirth, immortality idea with them.
Nice. So when do you think we're gonna see this product?
We're looking to do a Kickstarter for it in 2022. It won't be our first Kickstarter of 2022. That one will be catching on with Zine Quest. I don't want to give an exact date yet, but probably early Q2 is where I'm looking at for the Kickstarter right now. So
Yeah.
somewhere April, May, kind of that area is what I'm hoping to hit. But we'll see by the time we get there. I want to have all of the writing done before we do the Kickstarter this time. It'll take a little longer for Annie to get all the paintings done and everything, but I really want to get Torn and Beyond out as an actual book, if I can, in PDF form before the end of next year.
What kind of illustration does Andy do? You said painting. Does he
Ooh.
do everything? Does he actually do painting, or
Yeah,
is it
so
digital?
he does digital right now. I'm pretty sure he's also classically trained. Uh, Andy's painting is amazing. I earnestly believe, no bias aside, he's one of the best artists in the industry. He's won awards for like his art and everything. Like before, so this is his first RPG foray. Scavenger. Before this, he's done a lot of concept arts and video games and all that kind of stuff in Europe and everything. The cover for Scavenger was actually in this really big compilation of like the best art of that year, which is really cool. So Andy's art is definitely, it's also the thing that brought me into it. I saw his art and I was like, we're going to make something beautiful out of this. So when you see it, you'll be like, okay, this is amazing.
Do you have a favorite piece?
Oh yeah, actually, I can grab it out and send it to you. He did this one piece that's in the core book that we have. It's a very
Uh,
simple piece. It's a slum picture, but it's a picture of basically a bunch of people, which we call Sakai, who work in the slums and they work inside the city too. And they basically, they have like, the sacks of wheat or what have you on their head and everything, and they're moving around. But when you see it, it just feels so real. It's a very gorgeous painting. I'll go ahead and send it to you as we're talking about it.
yeah, it is. His art is really good,
Mm-hmm.
without a doubt.
Yeah,
People should.
Andy is great. Here we
Uh,
go.
what is it? Pandemonium Arts on
Yeah,
at
Pandemonium
Pandemonium
Arts on
Arts
Instagram.
on
Yeah.
Instagram. Yeah.
Yep. And you can find a lot of our art as well. You can find our art on our Shardstone Assembly Instagram or on our Facebook or what have you. I post it up on my own personal Facebook a lot because I just like posting it up and talking about it. I sent you the one that's my favorite in the book. That painting is just gorgeous. Andy, if you're watching this, chef's kiss.
Nice. Yeah, that's super awesome. I'm gonna actually, let's see. I'm gonna download it and then I will Try and upload it here and see if
Word,
we can look
word.
at it live. But yeah, so how long you guys been working together now?
So let's see. Let me go back. I think this is our third year. We're going on our fourth year. It took us about a year to build up to the Kickstarter. We released the PDF last year. It took us a year to put out the PDF. So it's 2 years. So yeah, this is our third year. It's our third, yeah, yep, third year. So I think in April of next year, it'll be our fourth year that we've been working together on the Scavenger project, I should say.
So I'm gonna pull this up the best of my ability, and folks, you can look at this cool. And even though it's kind of as a bit of an abstract,
Mm-hmm. We
and
have like, go ahead.
and uh and it doesn't look digital to me. It looks like someone actually like painted it,
Right?
right?
Ain't
Yeah,
bro, he is so good with brushstrokes. It's crazy.
yeah,
So it's not the most fantastical piece in the book, of course. I mean, there's a lot of very good pieces in the book that show more of the fantasy and stuff. But this piece is the one that whenever I see it, I just stop and stare at it. Cause I'm like, man, Andy, that is a good piece of art. And it
yeah.
really captures kind of like I think what the average life of an Akaran might be during the Great Dying here.
Nice. So, we gonna see any live plays or stream games in the near future?
Hopefully, I won't make any promises yet. So, of my playtest campaigns, many of them are streamers, like Lloyd, for example, from Yarl DM. He runs Twitch shows and everything, he did Iscloth and all of that. He's in one of my playtest games and all that stuff. So, hopefully, next year, before Torn and Beyond Kickstarter drops, I will definitely have at least one live stream of Torn and Beyond, like a game, like a one shot of it that I'll be putting up. I also will be doing a couple of Skullbox games next year on Mini Terrain Domain because some people have been asking like, what's it like when I run Skullbox? And if those do well, and if people like them, I will continue to do it. So here's hoping that I'm able to at least make something entertaining enough for people to want to watch.
I think you'd be able to pull it off, or either that, or just trick Jake from Terrain Domain into it.
Yeah, I just bust
And then
his
you can
balls
play.
about
Then
it.
you can play. Then you can actually be a player as well.
Yeah, that's what I'm really hoping for too. That'd be super fun.
Jake runs a lot of fantastic games, but I'm
Mm-hmm.
sure I'm sure whatever you threw together would be pretty awesome as well.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
If you were to do a stream game, what kind of theme would you go with?
Want to play with definitely. Well, yeah, I definitely want to play with Torn and Beyond. I've put a lot of like all of my ideas of the last few years into it. So it'd probably be things, rebirth, evolution, hope. Hope is the biggest theme in Scavenger. Everyone's trying to find something that they're hoping to find, that they can save their loved ones and that kind of stuff. I like playing with serious themes like that. So it'd probably be a more serious game overall. But there are still moments, like levity and comedy and all that stuff that I also know that we have to have, and I also enjoy having. But probably those kinds of themes is what I'd be looking to pursue.
Also, I don't think you can have an RPG without those things popping up, whether you want them to or
Yeah.
not.
Yeah. If you do anything in fantasy, hope and evolution and all that kind of stuff, that's kind of integral to not just that genre, but sci-fi, really any game genre. So playing with those things would be pretty important. Also, kind of playing with the idea of like your world is dying, like everything that you knew about is disappearing, and you are one of the only people that can hopefully maybe find a way to either stop it or save people. But in order to do so, you have to really put yourself through some crazy and insane things, and you probably won't return the same. So it's kind of like dealing with like that, almost a hero's journey, when you leave and you come back different, but then what happens after that, and what does that build into afterwards as well.
So how long have you guys been working on Scavenger?
So Scavenger is the first thing we started working on. So it's been the full 3 years we've been working together, has pretty much all been on Scavenger. Skullbox, because it's rules light, is a lot easier for us to make than Scavenger. The first book was like 237 pages, I think the PDF is, but Torn and Beyond will be between 300 to 400 pages, I think.
That's pretty beefy.
Yeah, they're big. They're really big books. So it takes probably the lion's share of our time right now, because we really are just two guys working on it.
Yeah.
Is dedicated to making Scavenger happen.
Now, Scavenger, like Andy had been working on before, right? Like the concepts.
hmm
Do you know how long
So
he had been in the works before you came into contact with it?
it had been a few years. It originally started as a project called Ziggurat, which it wasn't like a D&D project or anything. He was drawing basically characters and trying to make like his own, like, fantasy world and aesthetics and things.
Yeah.
Eventually, he changed it to Scavenger, and he was working with someone to make it into a D&D product. It's going to become almost like an art book and a showcase of like, stuff and making it work with D&D rules. I came onto the project and the other person ended up leaving, unfortunately, due to real life concerns. So when I came onto the project, we started greatly expanding it into what it is now. So, but he had been working on it for a few years beforehand. And that's why I say, again, it's kind of like, his baby or his child, because
Yeah.
he already had the idea with it. And I'm here to kind of just bring it up as much as I possibly can.
Was Andy already a gamer?
Yeah, he does play D&D games. I don't think because of COVID and everything, his
Yeah.
kind of gaming has died down a lot. But he was playing D&D in a campaign before this. But he's also big into video games. One of his favorite is Thief, for example, which he does art for and everything too. So
I'm just curious because sometimes I find that like a bunch of artists weren't necessarily gamers to start with, and then they like start
mhm,
doing all this art for
mhm.
gaming, and then they kind of get like sucked into the vortex that is
That's
RPGs.
kind of the case here. I kind of like I put my RPG talents into Andy, and I'm like, Andy, this is what we do now. Sorry, but you got to love it. So
Yeah, yeah. Which hey, there's nothing wrong with it. Like I'm a big
yeah.
proponent of getting people in the hobby however you can.
Me too. I try to shill it where I can. I think that the more people that play tabletop, they always love it. They always enjoy it. So
For sure. Speaking of which, how did you get started in the hobby?
so I started originally in high school, which for me was I know I'm a lot younger. That was in the mid 2000s, late mid 2000s. But that was during we were playing basically off D&D wiki, so we are just playing a whole bunch of bullshit essentially. I
Hmm.
took a break for a long time. Uh, After fifth edition came out, I was in college for my undergrad, and some of my friends were getting into it, and I was like, wow, this is pretty cool. So I actually joined what was back then the tabletop RPG one shot group. And I started getting into games from then, and the rest is history. I've been addicted ever since.
Yeah, yeah. A lot of good stuff came out of that
It
group.
did. It did. That's
A
where
lot of
I mean,
bullshit too, but you can't
yeah,
take the
yeah, a
good
lot
with
of
the
bullshit
bad.
too. Yeah, exactly, exactly. And I'm ultimately I'm very happy that I found the group when I did, because I mean it helps me not only improve as an artist, but it's letting me make the thing I always wanted to make, which is of course Scavenger.
Yeah. So you kind of started in high school and then picked it back up in college.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Exactly.
that seems like a fairly common theme.
Yeah, I think for a lot of people too, like in modern D&D, a lot of people start getting into it in college or in their 20s. Of course, like a lot of teens will play in schools and clubs and stuff, but I do think that a lot of people now play either in their 20s or their kids and their parents introduce them
Yeah.
to it.
So I see Robert Aducci's in the chat, which makes me think of Dark Sun.
Robert was
Had you played much Dark Sun in the
I have
past?
played Dark Sun. Robert was the person who was working on Scavenger before I was. So what's up, Robert? Good to see you. Hope you're
Mm.
doing well, my friend. Um, Dark Sun and Planescape are some inspirations that Andy draws on. Andy has actually met Braun before at conventions before, and they've talked about art and everything, techniques and all of that. So why we're not trying to be Dark Sun or Planescape.
Yeah.
A lot of stuff from those two things. They're definitely like great grandfathers for us in terms of Scavenger.
Yeah, I mean, Dark Sun hardly owns post-apocalyptic, right? They just
Yeah,
put a
exactly.
fantasy
Hmm.
spin on it, right? There's tons of post-apocalyptic stuff out there, and
Hmm.
even like I think there was litigation around the
Red
Fury
Dawn.
Road movie
Oh, Fury Road. Oh, really?
because of it had like really really like Brom tones and themes to it.
That's funny because I mean Brahms' inspiration for Dark Sun was the second Mad Max movie,
Yeah,
Road
yeah.
Warrior. Man, time is it's just funny how time works. But yeah, I mean Dark Sun's aesthetics are bar none some of the best in the industry's history. So I mean,
Yeah, I
anytime I see
mean,
Brahms art, I'm like, wow, yeah, that's it. That's Dark Sun. That's it.
yeah, Dark Sun, Planescape with Tony
Hmm.
DiRlizzi, and
Hmm.
also like Elmore did a really awesome job with Dragonlance as
He
well.
did. He did.
So to me, those three kind of like really stand out. But
Hmm.
like the difference between all the other settings, and Dark Sun and Planescape is like leagues.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. And that's kind of like the kind of like the realm that we want to be in for Scavenger, which I think we have achieved. I want Scavenger, and Andy feels the same way, to be one of those things that when people see it, they're drawn to it from the art
Yeah.
alone and then the writing in the world. So we try very hard to hit a high bar of quality for everything that we put out.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely seems to have that aesthetic where you look at it and you kind
Hmm.
of like, you can be like, oh, this is, it's super cohesive. This,
Yeah.
where
Hmm.
this, this came from, and
Exactly.
that was probably the strengths of both, Planescape
It was. They
and
had the
Dark
same
Sun.
artist, is what it was. A lot of RPGs, which is I get why they do it, and there's no problem with this. You have a lot of different artist hands in the pot, so to
Uh,
speak. I think an edge that me and Andy have is, Andy is not only the only artist on the project, he is the original artist on the project, right? So it's like all of our visuals are, like you said, very cohesive. Everything works together, which I think is extraordinarily important. There we go.
so we are right at the hour mark. Seems like a good thought to end on.
Mhm.
What are your final thoughts before we head on out?
So for my final thoughts, I urge everyone to please come look at Scavenger. I really think that if you read our quick start that we'll be releasing probably next week, or even the whole book, you'll find a setting that is unlike anything that's currently out in print, and you'll find something that you can really gravitate towards. I'm really confident that a lot of people will not only enjoy Scavenger, but also Skullbox, which I think is just a whole bunch of fun. And I'm really looking forward to the next stage in both of these projects.
As always, folks, there are links down in the description. Thanks for coming on. I really appreciate it. It's been a blast chatting with you. And until next time, everyone, stay nerdy.